Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we are tackling a massive, and I mean massive, question. Is it actually feasible for a major economy, one built almost entirely on fossil fuels, to make a complete energy transition?
And we're not just talking about a slow, gradual shift over a century.
No, we're talking about a radical, total teardown and rebuild of a nation's entire energy system in just 3 decades.
To get to the bottom of that, you need more than just speculation. You need a really rigorous model. And for this deep dive, we've got one. It's a comprehensive analysis called Pathways to a Fully Renewable Energy System in Iran, a scenario-based analysis across power, heat, transport, industry, and desalination.
That title really says it all. The mission here was to model a full 100% transition to renewable energy by 2050.
And crucially, it integrates 5 huge sectors that are normally looked at separately. You've got power, heat, transport, industry, and water.
Because you can't really solve one without the others, right? They're all connected. And the study uses 3 different policy paths to do this. A best policy scenario, or BPS, a delayed one, DPS, and then the current policy scenario, the CPS.
Exactly. And it's all modeled with hourly resolution across 9 different regions. So the big question we're trying to answer for you today is this. Can a country so reliant on hydrocarbons make this total shift affordably? And what are the specific, maybe even surprising technologies that make it all work?
Okay, let's start with the problem itself, because you can't really appreciate the scale of the solution without understanding the depth of the dependency.
The current numbers are just staggering. Natural gas and oil make up 97% of Iran's total primary energy consumption.
97%.
It's almost everything.
Yeah.
70% is natural gas, 27% is oil. And if you look just at electricity, 92% of that comes from burning gas and oil. Renewables are, they're barely a blip on the radar right now.
And what's holding that whole system in place isn't just, old infrastructure. It's active government policy.
Oh, absolutely. The study highlights these enormous domestic energy subsidies. We're talking about, in 2022 alone, 127 billion US dollars.
Billion with a B.
With a B. That made Iran the world's second largest country for fossil fuel subsidies that year. It completely distorts the market.
How can a solar farm compete with that?
It can't. You're trying to sell clean power against fuel that's basically being given away.
And of course, the cost isn't just economic, it's environmental. Iran's CO2 emissions have climbed, making it, 6th in the world in 2023, but 779 megatons of CO2.
And those emissions aren't some abstract global problem. You can see the effects right there. Intensifying heat waves, desertification, and it's pouring fuel on their national water crisis.
Which was already critical.
Already critical. The authors note Iran is among the top 10 most water-stressed countries in the world. So the link is direct. More emissions, worse climate, less water.
So that is a bleak picture. But the whole reason we're even having this discussion, the reason the study exists, is because of the incredible natural advantage they have.
Exactly. Solar. Iran is located right in the Sun Belt. You're looking at over 280 sunny days a year. The resource is there in abundance. The question is about will and technology.
Which is precisely what the study digs into with those 3 scenarios. So just to remind you, there's the CPS, current policy. That's business as usual.
Right. Then the DPS, delayed policy, which is a sort of slower middle path.
And finally, the BPS, the best policy scenario. That's the all-in rapid transition with strong carbon pricing.
And the core finding, the main takeaway for you, is that the BPS demonstrates that a 100% renewable system by 2050 is not just technically feasible, it's actually economically viable in the long run.
The aggressive path is the better one.
The model says yes, and the climate impact is, well, it's night and day. The VPS gets to 0 CO2 emissions by 2050. 0.
Down from 446 megatons in 2020.
Meanwhile, the business-as-usual CPS path is still pumping out over 633 megatons. So the choice is literally between 0 and an ongoing crisis.
So what's the engine of that zero-emission future? We said it before.
It's solar. Solar PV has to be the bedrock. In that best policy scenario, solar supplies more than 93% of the total primary energy demand. That's 300 and 450 terawatt hours by 2050.
Okay, hold on. Let's just pause on the sheer scale of that. To get there, the BPS requires an installed solar capacity of over 1,660 gigawatts.
A massive number.
To put that in perspective for you, that's roughly the total installed power capacity of the UK and Germany combined. The logistical challenge of building that in 3 decades is just mind-boggling.
It is an enormous undertaking. It requires a huge amount of upfront capital. But, and this is the crucial part, here is where the economic case just becomes undeniable.
Ah, the costs.
Despite that huge investment, the BPS ends up with the lowest levelized cost of electricity, the LCOE. By 2050, it settles at just 24.7 euros per megawatt hour.
And LCOE is basically the true all-in cost of power.
Precisely. And you compare that 24.7 to the CPS, the fossil fuel path, which is sitting at 49.4 euros per megawatt hour. The clean path is literally half the cost to generate power in the long run.
Okay, that LCOE number is a knockout punch for the economics. But relying on one variable source, solar, for 93% of your energy, that brings up a huge operational challenge.
It does. What happens when the sun goes down?
Exactly. How do you keep the whole country running?
You need incredibly advanced flexibility solutions. And this study leans heavily on two big ideas: storage and sector coupling.
Let's take storage first. For the short-term stuff, balancing the grid from day to night, what does the model use?
It needs a massive fleet of batteries. The total storage output in the BPS hits 511 terawatt hours. Most of that comes from utility-scale batteries. We're talking 720 gigawatt hours of capacity, and pumped hydro.
And they also include electric vehicles, right? Vehicle to grid.
They do. It's a complementary piece. V2G systems contribute about 4.2 terawatt hours, but they're careful to limit the drain on any single car to just 20% of its battery.
So that handles the daily swings. But the really tricky part, the thing that has always been the Achilles heel for renewables, is the seasonal problem. How do you store the massive solar surplus from summer to use it in the winter?
And that's where you can't just use a battery. It's too expensive. You need a chemical bridge, and that bridge is called Power to X, or PTX.
So you're turning electricity into something else.
Exactly. You're converting renewable electricity into a storable chemical, like green hydrogen. Instead of trying to keep electricity as electricity for 6 months, you turn it into a molecule you can store.
You're basically bottling the sunshine.
That's a great way to put it. In the BPS, a staggering 1,238 terawatt hours of electricity gets fed into electrolyzers to make green e-hydrogen. And here's the key to seasonal stability. Almost half of that hydrogen, 47%, is put into long-term storage, like in underground caverns.
So you have this huge reserve of hydrogen to draw on during the winter.
And that gives you the year-round zero-emission supply. But that hydrogen isn't just for making power. It's the first step in the solar to X pathway, creating synthetic fuels and chemicals.
This is how you clean up the really tough sectors.
This is the only way. The model projects a huge chemical synthesis industry by 2050. We're talking 499 terawatt hours of e-methanol, 125 of e-ammonia, and 63 terawatt hours of something called E-Fischer-Tropsch liquids.
Okay, let's follow where all these new molecules go. Let's start with industry, which the study says is the biggest energy consumer.
It is. It's a monster. It accounts for about 51% of the final energy demand by 2050, and it needs a complete overhaul.
So fossil fuels are just gone.
Completely phased out in the BPS. It's replaced by two things: direct electrification and those e-chemicals we just talked about. Electrification means things like swapping out coal blast furnaces for electric arc furnaces in steelmaking.
And using hydrogen for that, too.
Exactly. Using hydrogen-based direct reduced iron. But for the rest of the chemical demand, that's where the solar to X products come in. An overwhelming 82% of all those e-fuels are directed straight to the industrial sector to replace fossil feedstocks.
So industry stops burning gas and starts using these synthetic molecules. What about the other big fuel user, transport?
Right. Transport's final energy demand actually goes up to 171 terawatt hours. The easy part is direct electrification. That's about 22 terawatt hours for light vehicles, passenger cars.
Huge EV rollout, basically.
A huge EV rollout. But the real challenge is everything else, the heavy stuff that you can't just plug in.
Ships, planes, heavy trucks.
Exactly. For those, e-fuels are absolutely essential. The study really highlights marine freight, which alone accounts for over 58% of transport's energy demand by 2050.
Wow, over half.
Yeah, so that reliance on e-methanol and e-ammonia for shipping is a massive driver for the entire Power to X investment.
Okay, that leaves one last sector, the water energy nexus. We said water stress is a huge crisis. Desalination has to increase, right? And that takes a ton of energy.
It takes a tremendous amount of energy. The model shows desalination demand rising from less than 1% to about 13% of final energy demand.
13%, just for water.
Just for water. And it's all met by seawater reverse osmosis plants, powered by renewable electricity. That's a 328 terawatt hour demand.
Which is a huge number.
It is.
But
And here's a detail I found fascinating. The single biggest chunk of that electricity isn't even for the filtering process itself.
no, what is it for?
It's for vertical water transport. Just pumping the fresh water from sea level up to the cities. That alone takes 111 terawatt hours. It just shows you have to factor in geography.
Okay, so the tech is plausible, the infrastructure is immense. Let's circle back to the total cost. You said earlier that the BPS, the clean path, actually has a slightly higher total annualized cost in 2050, 117 billion euros versus 113 for the dirty path. So why is it the better option?
It comes down to the cost structure. And this is probably the most important economic insight in the whole study. Think of it this way. The BPS is like buying a house.
Okay.
You have massive upfront capital costs, the CapEx. It peaks at 85 billion euros. You're building your solar panels, your electrolyzers. But once it's built, your fuel costs are zero, forever.
And the CPS, the fossil fuel path, is like renting forever.
Exactly. The CPS looks cheaper up front, but it locks the country into paying 81 billion euros every single year for fuel. The BPS pays the price tag once, then eliminates that massive recurring bill. Its lifetime value is higher.
So the fossil fuel system only seems cheaper if you ignore the massive hidden cost of fuel you have to keep buying.
That's it, and the study drives this home. They calculate that the fossil fuel path would become more expensive than the clean path just by applying a tiny CO2 price of about 10 euros per ton in 2050. Even that minimal cost makes the whole business as usual case fall apart.
So if the long-term economics are so clear, what are the key policy levers you have to pull to get through that massive initial investment?
Two things are absolutely essential. First, you have to phase out those $127 billion in fossil fuel subsidies. That money needs to be redirected to the clean energy build-out.
And second,
You need effective CO2 pricing. You have to make the markets see the true cost of emissions. In the BPS, that CO2 price revenue peaks at 45 billion euros in 2035, which really accelerates the shift.
and for those really high-value e-fuels, what does it take to make them competitive one-to-one with, say, diesel?
To get those E-Fisher-Tropsch liquids fully competitive at the pump, so to speak, the study calculates you'd need a CO2 cost of around 246 euros per ton. Now, the system doesn't need that to work, but it shows you the kind of policy signal required to get a total substitution of all liquid fuels.
This has been an incredibly detailed roadmap. Let's try and sum up the key takeaways, Winnie, from this deep dive.
I think the findings are pretty clear. This study shows a transition to a 100% renewable system is 1, technically sound, and 2, economically superior in the long run. The whole system is built on a foundation of solar PV, enabled by that chemical bridge of power to X and advanced storage.
And the final numbers really do speak for themselves. The best policy scenario gets you to zero emissions by 2050 with a stunningly low electricity cost of 24.7 euros per megawatt hour. But, and it's a big but,
Yeah.
it's only possible with the political will to make that huge upfront investment and cut those crippling subsidies.
Which leaves us with one final provocative thought. The study, because it's looking for the cost-optimal solution, lands on a system that is almost entirely solar. It's over 93%.
Right.
But a question for future research is this.
Yeah.
What is the marginal cost of building in more diversity? What if you spent just a little bit more to add more wind power to the mix? Could that enhance flexibility, maybe reduce your reliance on chemical storage, and just generally mitigate the risks if you have a year with less than average sunshine?
The classic trade-off, strict cost optimization versus diversification for long-term resilience. A crucial question for any country making this leap. And that wraps up our deep dive. Thank you for joining us. You can find the source material, Pathways to a Fully Renewable Energy System in Iran, a scenario-based analysis across power, heat, transport, industry, and desalination in our show notes. We'll see you next time.